I had always thought our relationship was perfect, or at least I wanted to believe it was. We had been together for 3 years, and though there were ups and downs, it felt like we were a solid couple. It wasn't until our anniversary that everything came crashing down. We had planned a special night to celebrate, a quiet dinner at our favorite restaurant. As I sat across from her, smiling and reminiscing about our early days, she seemed distant, distracted even. Her eyes kept wandering, her phone buzzing on the table, though she didn't pick it up. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe she was just a little tired. After the meal, we walked through the park, and I suggested we take a quick selfie to mark the occasion. That's when she got a notification and excused herself to take a call. I didn't think much of it, but when she returned, she seemed different. Her smile was too forced, and there was a lingering look in her eyes. Later that evening, she invited me over to her place, and we were about to settle in when there was a knock on the door. I was caught off guard when I opened it to find a guy standing there, someone I hadn't seen before. He was older, with an air of familiarity that made me feel uneasy. Before I could say anything, she rushed to the door, threw her arms around him, and kissed him. It wasn't just a friendly greeting, it was intimate, like they had shared something I wasn't a part of. My heart sank, and I froze. They pulled away, and she looked at me with a mixture of guilt and confusion, like she couldn't decide whether to apologize or explain. Finally, she spoke. "This is Michael, my first love." My blood ran cold. The words felt like a slap in the face. She had kissed him, on our anniversary, and all I could do was stand there, feeling like the biggest fool. We talked for hours that night. She explained how they had reconnected, how she had been thinking about him for months before our anniversary, and how the emotions had just come rushing back when she saw him again. I don't know what hurt more, the betrayal or the realization that I wasn't enough for her, that our anniversary, a day that should have been special for both of us, was a day she chose to rekindle a past love. We ended things soon after. It felt like everything I thought I knew about our relationship had been a lie. But I still remember the way she kissed him, how it was so full of passion, and how that moment shattered everything we had built together. In the days that followed, I tried to wrap my head around what had happened. I reached out to friends, shared my feelings with family, and even sought advice from a therapist. Everyone was sympathetic, but no one seemed to have an answer that could bring closure. How do you move on from something like this? How do you get past the image of your partner sharing a kiss with someone else, especially on the day that was supposed to mean the most to both of you? The hardest part was seeing how quickly she moved on. A week after we ended things, I noticed she had posted a picture with him on social media, captioned with something along the lines of "reunited with my first love." It stung in a way I couldn't explain. I had been sitting in the silence of our breakup, trying to process the betrayal, while she was out there, openly celebrating the very thing that had torn me apart. I couldn't help but check her profile every now and then, despite promising myself I wouldn't. The picture seemed to be the start of a new chapter for her, one where I was no longer needed. I had hoped, maybe naively, that she'd be torn about what had happened, that she would regret kissing him. But instead, she looked happier than I'd ever seen her. Maybe it wasn't just a kiss. It was everything they had shared before, the history they had together that I could never replace. One day, I ran into her at a coffee shop. She was sitting with him, laughing, as if nothing had ever changed. I tried not to stare, tried not to let the overwhelming wave of hurt show on my face, but it was impossible. She saw me, and for a moment, our eyes met. Her expression softened, like she wanted to say something, apologize even. But before she could, he leaned in and kissed her, a quick, casual kiss on the cheek. They were so comfortable, and there I was, still carrying around the pieces of my broken heart. I left without saying a word. It felt like there was no point anymore. She had chosen him, her first love, the person who could give her what I never could. I don't think she fully understood what it did to me, how seeing them together again so easily destroyed any hope I had left of her feeling guilty or conflicted. I wasn't a part of her life anymore. She had chosen her past over our future, and in doing so, erased everything we had. It wasn't until later that I started to see things more clearly. The relationship we had, the one I thought was perfect, was always a bit of a fantasy. I was so focused on making her happy, on preserving this image of us that I had built in my head, that I overlooked the cracks. She had been holding on to something from her past, something that was never truly mine. Maybe it wasn't even about me. It was about her finding something real again, even if that meant letting go of me. As painful as it was, I came to realize that sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes you can do everything right, and still, the person you care about chooses someone else. And as much as it hurt to admit, I was better off walking away, because I deserved someone who chose me in the same way I had chosen her. It's been months now, and I've tried to move on. I've met new people, but I don't think I'll ever forget how it felt to see her kiss him on our anniversary. It was a moment everything changed, the day the person I thought I knew became someone completely different. And as much as I wish I could go back to that night, to that moment before everything fell apart, I know I can't.
Months passed, and life began to feel a little less heavy. At first, it was like every small memory of her still haunted me. The places we used to visit, the songs we shared, and the quiet moments of just being together, they were all reminders of what I had lost. But gradually, I started to find solace in the quiet, in the absence of her. I filled the void with things I had neglected: old hobbies, time with friends, and a sense of peace that came from being alone, without constantly wondering where I stood in someone else's heart. It wasn't easy, though. Every so often, I'd come across something that reminded me of her, an old text, a photo, or even a song we used to laugh about. The pain would surge back, but I learned how to handle it. I let myself feel it, then I moved on. I had to, for my own sanity. The hardest part, however, was the creeping realization that the woman I thought I knew had changed. And so had I. I wasn't the same person who had fallen for her, hopelessly in love with the idea of us. I had spent so long believing in this version of our relationship that I never saw the cracks until it was too late. I'd still hear about her from mutual friends, how things were progressing with Michael, how happy she seemed. At first, it stung. But eventually, I accepted that I didn't have a right to be hurt anymore. She had moved on. She had her history with him, and maybe it was always going to be him. I would never fit into the picture she had painted in her mind, and no amount of longing or regret could change that. One evening, after a long day at work, I was scrolling through social media when I saw something that made my stomach drop. It was a post from her. This time, it wasn't with Michael. Instead, it was a picture of her alone, standing in front of a lake at sunset. The caption read, "Learning how to love myself again." I sat there staring at it, not sure how to feel. A part of me wanted to believe that she had finally come to terms with everything, that she had learned from the pain, and was genuinely growing. Another part of me wondered if it was a message to me, some sort of hint that she regretted what happened between us, but was too proud to admit it. I scrolled down the post and read the comments. Friends were supportive, telling her how proud they were of her, how strong she seemed. But there was one comment that stood out. Michael had written, "You're amazing. Always have been." I didn't know why, but something in that moment clicked for me. Maybe it was the way he still had a hold on her, even through a seemingly innocent comment. Maybe it was the realization that no matter how much I had wanted to be a part of her story, I would never be the person who got to hold that place. She had been a part of my life, but I was no longer a part of hers.
And that was okay.
That night, I deleted everything that reminded me of her. No more photos, no more old texts, no more lingering in the past. It felt freeing, like I had finally broken free from the chains of regret and what-ifs. I wanted to start fresh, to stop comparing my journey to the one she was on. Eventually, I found someone new. Someone who made me laugh. Someone who cared. Someone who didn't come with the baggage of an old relationship. She wasn't perfect, and neither was I, but we were figuring it out together. We had our own stories, our own shared experiences, and while the shadow of my past lingered, it no longer had a hold on me. Looking back now, I realized that the hardest part wasn't just the kiss she shared with him, or the betrayal that tore me apart. It was the letting go. Letting go of the person I thought she was. Letting go of the future I thought we would have. But in letting go, I made room for something new. For healing. For growth. And maybe, just maybe, I was starting to understand what she meant when she posted that photo at the lake, learning how to love myself again. I wasn't the same person I had been back then, and that was okay. It was the only way forward. It had been a year since everything fell apart, and the weight of the past had begun to feel lighter. I could finally reflect on what had happened without the same sharp sting, without the feeling of betrayal constantly hanging over me. Life had its ups and downs, as life tends to do, but I had learned how to live without her, how to keep moving even when the memories of what we had threatened to resurface. The new relationship I was in had its own challenges. It wasn't easy to trust again, not completely. I still found myself comparing things, the way she would react in situations, the way she looked at me when I shared something personal. It wasn't fair to her, and I knew that. But it was a process.
We talked about it.
We worked through it. She didn't mind my scars, but she didn't want me to carry them into something that could be beautiful and fresh. I had moments of doubt, of course. There were days when I would wake up in the middle of the night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had truly moved on. I thought about her occasionally, about how she had been my everything for so long. But those thoughts didn't hold the same power over me anymore. I realized the love I had for her, the deep connection we shared, had been real, just like the hurt that followed. But I couldn't keep living in that space. I couldn't let it define me. One morning, a message popped up on my phone as I sat in my favorite cafe, sipping my coffee. It was from her. "Hey, I know this might be out of the blue, but I've been thinking a lot about the past. About us. I don't know what made me reach out, but I hope you're doing okay."
Really?
The message caught me off guard. It wasn't an apology, not in the traditional sense, but there was something in her words that felt genuine, vulnerable even. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to just leave it unread, to avoid reopening old wounds. But another part of me, the part that had done a lot of healing, wanted to acknowledge her. I didn't rush to reply. I sat there, letting the moment pass. After a few hours, I sent a simple message back. "I'm doing better than I ever thought I would. I hope you will too." That was it. There was no need to dive deeper into the past. No need to ask her about her life with Michael or what she had been thinking when she kissed him on our anniversary. Those were questions that didn't matter anymore. The chapter was closed, and I had long since moved on. Her response came quickly. "I'm glad to hear that. I really am. Take care of yourself." That was the last message we exchanged. And in a strange way, it felt like closure. Not the kind I had expected or dreamed about, but the kind that came from time, growth, and distance. I didn't have to hate her, and I didn't have to hold on to the anger. I just had to let go. I realized I didn't need her to be okay, to find peace with what happened. I had to find that peace on my own. The past wasn't something I could change. The anniversary kiss, the betrayal, and the heartache, it was all part of the story, part of the journey that had led me here, to this place of self-discovery and renewal. I never stopped loving her in some way. But I love myself more now, and I understood that sometimes love doesn't follow the path you expect it to. Sometimes it takes you through the hardest of lessons to get you to where you need to be. And in the end, that's where I found my peace, finally free from the shadow of what could have been, and ready to step forward into what was waiting ahead.